Allie is our dedicated artist, writer, and activist, an American who's living in France.
Hello.
Quite the power, Allie. I thought that you were a French person living in France, so that's cool to clear that up.
No, I'm becoming more and more French the longer I'm here, whether I want to or not. It's kind of weird how assimilation works like that. Although it's not necessarily a bad thing, because most of the American habits I'm shedding myself of aren't necessarily things to be proud of. Plus cheese. I'm not officially French, but I am technically a resident of France, legally speaking, but still an American citizen, unfortunately.
Okay, so you're out there. You're full of camembert and brie, and life is good.
Life is pretty good. It's definitely different. It's easier here, although last couple days have been kind of crazy because pretty much the entire country has been shut down.
Yes,
but that happens a lot here.
We are going to get into that for sure. And I did want to ask you though, that one Patti LaBelle song, she says, "Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir?" What is that about?
The weird thing about that song is like the only person who would probably ever say that is a prostitute, because vous is formal. Most Latin-based languages, all the Romance, like in English we just have you. It's you no matter where you're talking to your kid or your teacher. But most of the Latin-based languages, there's a formal you and an informal you. So in France, vous is formal and tu is informal. And in the real world, like if you know anybody enough that you're gonna ask them to sleep with you, you're probably on a tu basis, not a vous basis.
Okay.
Like one of those, that's one of those lines that like American tourists come here and kind of make an ass of themselves because they say it and they think it's funny. And realistically, like if you're in a bar and you're asking, if you've already had a couple of drinks with someone and you're asking them the equivalent of that question, it would realistically be tu veux coucher avec moi, not voulez-vous coucher.
That's why I wanted to clarify that with you, so that when I go to France and start asking chicks that question, am I being a dickhead or not? Okay.
Yeah, no, you're vous is a formality. Like vous is what you'd use with like your boss or your in-laws or anyone you don't know, and it's actually kind of like that's one of those cultural things I've had to really learn. That all Anglophones fuck up sometimes. I still fuck it up regularly. I'll be in the post office and I'll accidentally address the person behind the counter with tu. And then, they give me this look and then realize I'm not French and then give me the, oh, you're just an idiot look. And then I give them sheepish kind of, oops, sorry, I'm just an idiot. One day I will cure myself of that, but it's actually one of the few like linguistic faux pas I still, because when I'm talking to like anyone in regular life, I'm always using tu, and it's just not natural to me to switch to that formality when I'm like ordering a pizza or whatever. But it's an important formality.
You're very polite. You're very polite, and now that I realize I am not a French prostitute, I will not say that when I go to France. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, you want to use the tu veux, not the voulez-vous. Voulez-vous is like when you're asking like someone behind a counter if they'll do something for you, or whether you're asking your boss to do something, or that's a formal voulez-vous.
See, Matt, the more you know, the more you know. The more you know. We're informative as hell on the podcast.
Me and Norbert have to deal with the same thing, that in Korea you have differing levels of formality, and if you mess it up, then people look at you strangely.
Yeah, no, I definitely I get the look, and then they hear my accent, and then I get this like, oh, you poor thing, you don't know any better, and I do know better, it's just habit.
Yeah, I'm 6'2" and I'm black in Korea, so they look at me strangely anyway. I just speak Korean and they just deal with it or they don't. Life is good. Life is good.
Yeah, and that's, I speak French to the best of my ability, but I'm always going to sound like an American. And I'm always going to make stupid linguistic mistakes, and vous versus tu is definitely one of them that I'm just probably going to fuck up till the day I die. And, you know, I'm fine with that. There's worse things to fuck up.
I've heard your accent, though. It's much better than many, so. I'm
working at it. I'm at the point where, like, I'll hear other Anglophones speak French and I wince. And that's how I know I'm doing okay, because, like, I can now hear, like, the incredibly, incredibly painful, like, you're not even trying, you're pronouncing every single sound just like you're from fucking Manchester, and that hurts. Yeah.
Manchester, England. I'm sorry, every time I hear the word Manchester, across the Atlantic Sea, that just pops into my head.
That's one of my favorite movies. I love that movie.
Manchester,
we did that in high school.
It's amazing. Manchester is an amazing city. But Manchester was incredible. There's actually a whole lot of leftist history there. There's like a whole lot of, like, Marx and Engels both spent a whole lot of time there. Yep. And there's a whole lot of, like, like, you walk around, there's like a historic plaque, you know, like Marx ate here, or Marx did this here, and this and that. And the mascot of the city, like the city logo, it's a bee, and it's a bee to signify the worker bees.
Nice.
So, yeah, so it's like, I had no idea what to expect, and I was just in and best Indian food I ever had in my life, as well as the spiciest Indian food I ever had in my life, were both in Manchester. So I recommend Manchester. It's like, it's got a really cool vibe.
So we're gonna jump into what we like to call the lightning round. You know.
Okay.
You just give us your quick opinion on just a couple of weird stories that we got from the last week or so. The first one, there was a sighting of a polar bear spray painted with graffiti. And we got this from the Guardian. A video showing a polar bear spray painted with graffiti has sparked outrage among environmentalists amid fears the creature was targeted by locals in an area where the animals increasingly forage. This bear was in Russia, and they spray painted it with the letters T-34, the name of a World War II Soviet tank. And now, you know, polar bear is big and white because it's snowy outside, so the white fur lets it blend in. Except now this polar bear's got a giant T-34. What do you think about that?
You know, when it comes to humans versus bears, I'm always going to go with the bears. So fuck that. I am pro bear all the way. The reason the Russians are so angry at the bears is because the bears are entrenching on, you know, what they consider their land, and that's only happening because we're melting the fucking ice caps because capitalism. So whereas I'm generally a fan of graffiti, you don't spray paint bears. That's just not okay. I am pro bear all the way.
I read stories like that, and I can't even click on it, right? Like, it's just humiliating. Oh.
Yeah, no, that's the worst of humanity right there. That's like why.
That's what we got, man. Climate change has driven Russia's Arctic polar bear population into closer contact with humans, as hungry bears looking for food have increasingly foraged in towns in northern Russia. A town in Novaya Zemlya, an island chain of northern Russia, saw an influx of more than 50 polar bears in February. And the video of the bear was uploaded to Facebook by Sergei Kavry. That's my Russian accent, thank you. A World Wildlife Federation employee based in Russia's Far East. He said he received the footage through a WhatsApp, and he said, "Why? He won't be able to hunt without being noticed." Bled. My terrible Russian accent, thank you. It's sad. It's sad.
Yeah, that's not okay. That's not cool. Spray walls, not bears.
Yes.
All right, moving on to the next story. New York Daily News. Thomas Tracy writes, a 3-blade knife that looks like superhero Wolverine's claw found inside a Bronx home. True or false? Wolverine's claw was found inside a Bronx home. What do you think? I mean,
my instinct is false, but I lived in New York, man. I mean, there was I remember a guy in Harlem with a tiger in his fucking apartment. I remember, like, New York scales to, like, produce crazy shit that you didn't think would. So if there's anywhere where you would find a Wolverine claw, it would be in New York.
Totally, man. And then in an act of incredibly burying the lead, the reason why they found the Wolverine claw in the house is because it was a domestic violence incident. So the headline is not that a man was beating a woman. The headline is Wolverine claw found in a house. Yeah.
Yeah, that's this does not, as a former New Yorker, this does not surprise me in the least.
You know what I'm saying? You know, this guy's beating the hell out of his wife. No, there's a Wolverine claw. That's awesome.
Wolverine claw. That's the story. Yep.
Life in New York City. People always, when are you coming back, Norbert? Well, you know, what's the ratio of Wolverine claws to apartments these days, folks? I mean, Jesus Christ. It's so common to just beat your wife that's not even the important part.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunately, like, that's my reaction. Of course, the Wolverine claw is out of the ordinary. Anything else in that story is just de rigueur for a New York evening, unfortunately.
Allie, are you originally a New Yorker?
I'm originally from New Jersey, but anyone born in North New Jersey, we say we're from New York as a matter of, like, personal dignity. So, you know,
I was born in Brooklyn.
I grew up 32 miles away from New York City.
And also a lot of people don't, like, outside of America, aren't super aware of New Jersey. So logically, you would.
Especially internationally. If you tell people you're from New Jersey, you give this blank look. If you say you're from New York, they immediately light up and, like, you know, mutter some sort of stereotype. I mean, I lived in New York proper. I lived in Brooklyn for a decade, so, you know, I was actually a New Yorker. But yeah, I grew up. You know, I could see Manhattan from my rooftop on a day.
These are all the things that the people from Jersey say. You know.
Yeah.
If you tell a person from New York you're from New Jersey, we give you a blank look. You know, that's what we do. Woo ha ha. No one cares about. It's hilarious though, man. It's the same thing that people from Buffalo, they're always, I'm from New York. Really? Where are you from? Albany. People are like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
That's all right. You're a beautiful person, Allie.
Thank you.
Next in the lightning round. So if you're poor, you're dead. Watch British people gasp when they find out the cost of healthcare in the United States.
Yeah, I saw that.
Common Dreams. That's a great video, right?
I saw that. It's validating. It's very similar. I mean, when I tell people here about healthcare, I mean, I was just there's two ways to, like, make people's jaw drop pretty reliably here, and that's, like, either tell them about healthcare or tell them about student loan debt. But yeah, that was a very satisfying video to watch. Unfortunately, you know, those who it needs to affect the most will find some reason or another to not take it to heart, which is always the case with, you know, confirmation bias and Americans who, like, don't want to pull their heads out of the sand. But yeah, that was pretty damn funny. That was pretty damn funny, and yes, very validating.
Britons in a video released Tuesday expressed incredulity, I love that word, incredulity, and shock at the high cost of healthcare in the United States, and thanked the UK's publicly funded and administered National Health Service for sparing the country's people such exorbitant prices. So if you're poor, you're dead. That's the headline.
Yep.
And that's it.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
Two different men appeared shocked when told Americans can be charged $2,500 for an ambulance ride. For real? One asks. Why? Asks another. And here's the thing about this. The person on the street interviews that made up the 4-minute video come in the wake of reports late November that the ruling Conservative Party, which faces off against left-leaning Labour December 12th in national elections, is planning on opening the UK's health system to a more US approach after leaving the European Union. What the hell?
Yep. Well, and they've been preparing for, I mean, 99% of the complaints that people make about the NHS does not have to do with the system itself. It has to do with it being underfunded, because they've just been stripping funding from it nonstop, for the past 2 decades. And that's exactly what they're prepping it for. They want to they want to create the illusion that perhaps, and it's the same fucking, market-based, open choice. I hear these same buzzwords that, the Rand Pauls of the world use to try to convince Americans that, they have, quote, freedom and choice. And let's just ignore the fact that, 50,000 people a year die from lack of access to healthcare. You've got choice, you've got freedom.
Choice.
Yeah, no, it's just amazing, like, what they can do with just those 2 words, right? Freedom and choice. It's just, it never fails to blow my mind.
Americans have been trained to revere the police.
Totally.
Yeah.
Almost mindlessly.
Yep.
It is insane.
Like, of course, accidents happen, but when you look at this situation, like, they didn't take any precautions at all.
Nope.
None.
It was Grand Theft Auto. The law is on their side. The police. It's two things. It's knowing that the American public will overall accept it because they've been brainwashed from the time they could, shit in a diaper, that the police are your friends, the police are our heroes, the police practice. I think back to like my elementary school days, bringing the fucking cop in, giving out cookies and letting us pet the police dog. The indoctrination goes so fucking deep. And then, in terms of lack of consequences, that's the thing with in the United States, the cops can basically do whatever they want. And, whether it's just, local law or Supreme Court law, it's all on their side. They can just basically kill without abandon. And so they do.
It's insane. Yeah. The story, police may have shot over 200 rounds during a firefight with suspects who hijacked a UPS truck. This one, it was on complex.com. A shootout between several law enforcement agencies, and two armed robbers led to the death of a UPS employee and a bystander. Go ahead, man.
It's notable, of course, that the person who was taken hostage is not white.
Right. Yep.
If that motherfucker was white, you can almost bet that this could have very well have played out differently.
Or at least the reaction would be different.
Yeah, that too.
You gotta talk him down. You gotta talk him down. Hey, buddy, I know you killed all those people in the church, but do you want to go to Burger King? It's all right.
Yep. And then UPS put out a statement thanking law enforcement after their employee. That's this icing on the cake to me. Literally thanking law enforcement.
UPS issued the statement, "We are deeply saddened to learn a UPS service provider was a victim of this senseless act of violence. We extend our condolences to the family and friends of our employee and the other innocent victims involved in the incident. We appreciate law enforcement service and will cooperate with authorities as they continue the investigation."
Yeah.
Yep. Did we have to? The UPS driver's name was Frank Ordonez, 27. He was on his knees while the shooting occurred, and the innocent bystander, 70-year-old Richard Cutshaw, was shot while sitting in a car at the intersection where the shootout took place. Ordonez, Cutshaw, and both suspects were killed, according to CNN. And they don't know exactly how many shots they fired, but over 200 rounds. Miami-Dade Police Department, Pembroke Pines, Florida Highway Patrol, and Miramar. Just Grand Theft Auto in the streets.
So I'm curious if you know, Norbert, was the hostage shot by the hostage taker or by cops?
The way that this story has unfolded, everything seems to be like these bullets just came from the cops.
Right.
These bullets came from the cops, because if the hostage taker shot the hostage, that would be the headline.
Yeah.
Instead of
you would assume. You would assume. Yeah.
You would assume that. Again, that would be another case of burying the lead. Oh, by the way, the hostage taker shot the guy. In other news,
True or false? All right.
Okay. You too, Allie.
Okay.
Muhammad Ali was a key help in exposing COINTELPRO.
True.
Oh my God, that's got to be true. Come on.
It is delightfully true.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Delight.
So apparently, there was a student group who basically raided the FBI and found the proof of COINTELPRO, and Muhammad Ali, I think, I'm not sure exactly how he helped, but I think maybe he did some funding for this group. I'm not sure.
What?
Yeah.
Well, America was not feeling Muhammad Ali when he was alive. Same thing with Martin Luther King. And after Muhammad Ali unfortunately fell into the Parkinson's and he couldn't talk, then everybody, Muhammad Ali is a hero.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say some targets of the COINTELPRO, and you have to tell me if they're actually targets or if I made them up.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Listen, basically, unless you say the Care Bears, all of these are true. I mean, my bad, but God damn it, let's go.
Well, of course, the main targets were feminists, the black movement, the new left, socialists, communists, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. All right. Mumia, target or no?
Yes.
I'm going to say true.
Yes. James Baldwin.
Yes, so absolutely.
Oh my God, that beautiful man. True.
Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
Yes. They tried to get him. It's true, baby.
Stokely Carmichael.
Oh yeah.
Truth.
Eldridge Cleaver.
Yep.
Fred Hampton.
True.
Yep.
June Cleaver.
Ernest Hemingway.
Hemingway, huh? You know what? I would say yes, because that guy was all about hunting humans for sport and suicide.
He was a target.
He was. Oh wow.
See? Yeah, man. Yeah. Listen. Not for nothing. Hemingway. People love his writing and whatnot, but you dive into his writing, that man was dark.
Oh, totally. I was just assuming there had to be a false in here somewhere.
What did I say? When he says the Care Bears, that's when we say, okay.
I think the Care Bears would have been a target. I mean, if there's anything that Pat Robertson thinks is going to make kids gay, it's a bunch of bears like beaming rainbows at people, and that shit definitely warped my childhood. I mean, I'm an anarchist. I grew up on the Care Bears. I'd target that shit.
Look, man. Okay, those guys, when they do the Care Bear countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you just covered in an ejaculation of happiness, nah. Even COINTELPRO wouldn't be able to deal with that shit, man. Let me tell you. We are sorry we ruined your game, Matt.
That's okay. That's okay. I didn't actually prepare any falses.
Okay.
Because the list of false is not as big as the list of trues. That's why.
Right.
Here we are at this point. We know for a fact that Verizon and AT&T gave everyone's information over to the government after 9/11. Like, what? You want to know what these people are doing on the internet? Here you go. Just gave it to them. Yep. Just gave it to them. So, I mean, COINTELPRO is just the small bud from which all of this surveillance shit has grown into.
Yep.
That actually, Matt, real quick. The
Yes.
Department of Homeland Security, according to Time Magazine, Department of Homeland Security may require U.S. citizens to be photographed at the airport. This was from December. Yeah. So, yeah, man. This is something that they're proposing. Why COINTELPRO? Of course, you're right. They would probably take pictures of the Care Bears and fondle them. Are you carrying gummy berry juice? We're Care Bears. We're not gummy bears, motherfucker. What do you mean? Yeah. That's all bad.
Yeah, I mean, now we have black identity extremists or whatever being targeted, right? So, yeah, the COINTELPRO is not as old as we think, maybe. All right, Julian Assange was pulled illegally from the Ecuadorian embassy in London not too long ago. A Spanish firm reported by El País spied on Assange in the embassy. Assange is now in Belmarsh. Why? Sweden dropped its investigation, mysteriously conducted for more than 9 years. So the only possible reason British authorities could be validly claiming as a reason for holding him right now is having jumped bail. Of course, this is an offense that is normally a small fine or 6 months in jail. He's done that 6 months. So the United States has revealed an indictment against Assange, much of it based on the Espionage Act of 1917, a World War I era piece of legislation that was crafted in order to intimidate anti-war protesters and leftists. Public interest defense is not available against such charges. The charges stem from the collateral murder video and the various cables. showing the U.S. military contractors committing war crimes, knowingly killing journalists and civilians. These charges have nothing to do with the 2016 election, so you can think whatever you like about Assange, but legal principles and precedents have nothing to do with our personal preferences or political affiliations. If Assange is extradited to the U.S., it is 100% certain that he will not receive a fair trial, given the limitations built into the Espionage Act he is being charged under. So an Australian journalist will be found guilty of publishing materials the U.S. government doesn't like. The obvious implications for freedom of the press here couldn't be more dire. If you like the idea of an open, democratic society that operates with due process, whatever you might feel about Assange personally, you will or you should support the release of this political prisoner. Okay, so that's my soapbox for the day. I've been wanting to get that off my chest for a while.
Nice. Allie, what do you think about
I agree. Assange? I don't necessarily love him as a human being, but when you're being persecuted for what government you pissed off, they have this way of making it pretty damn obvious. And yeah, nope, I'm pretty much in agreement with that.
Yeah, whistleblowers by the definition of the name, whistleblowers, they obviously committed a crime by snatching the information. But it's not like he snatched, Obama's iPhone password, These are big deal things. Hey, these cats are just doing, well, I've always found that phrase as well, war crimes. But anyway, yeah, these cats are committing war crimes. And Snowden, oh, by the way, everything that you type into the internet is in a giant server somewhere in Utah, That's something that people should know. But the demonization of these people, and unfortunately our friend, it sounds like I hate Obama, actually, because this is now the third podcast where I'm like, Obama did this too. But yeah, he was very big in prosecuting whistleblowers, and it's a shame.
Well, let's be careful. Assange is not a whistleblower. He just published things that he received. A whistleblower is somebody inside some organization, usually the government, who knows something about something. So, like Snowden is more properly a whistleblower. Assange is just publisher.
Thank you, Matt. There it is. Norbert is wrong. Ba-ba-da.
Well, you're right. It's so easy to confuse a lot of these things. Like, people call him a hacker. He does have a history. Like, when he was about 20 or so, he got into some trouble for hacking, but this has nothing to do with hacking.
No, you're right, man. Because I just got it confused, like you said. Yeah.
It's easy to get it confused because the media keeps muddying the water with like 99% of anything that they ever publish about this. Now we get to probe our wonderful guest about things she knows.
That's right. Tell us things that you know about France, and I will play some awesome accordion music in the background.
So there are uprisings in Chile, Bolivia, Ecuador, Lebanon, Iraq, and many other places, including France. Mm-hmm. The Gilets jaunes, of course, have been protesting for about a year. Yep. Macron is less popular than Trump. I think his ratings, Macron is about 35%, whereas Trump is closer to 40 or 45%. Labor leaders in France seem likely to be content with Macron backing off his proposed pension cuts. But many in France, I'm thinking the Yellow Jackets included, would not find that sufficient. They would want Macron to step down. So your initial thoughts on some of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what is really important to remember, and I think, Americans, just a slight digression, when Macron was elected, reading both like, the American media and especially like the reactions to people who I otherwise respect on Facebook, it was really enlightening, because it was like, everyone saw him as like either another, Bill Clinton-esque, Tony Blair-esque, here's this liberal type that, look at him, he's young and he's sexy and, he's going to be great. Whereas, the only reason Macron won is because everyone was so terrified of the idea of Marine Le Pen winning. I mean, at least, I always say, at least Trump has a fan club. He's got these zealots with these red hats who like carry guns and will like die for him and, do horrible, violent things and show up and harass minorities on his behalf. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't like it, but I almost sympathize for Macron sometimes, because like truly nobody likes the guy, and nobody has liked the guy since day one. He's not the popular choice. He was like, we can have the fascist or we can have the banker. Okay, great. Let's go with the banker. He's not a fascist. And, Trump acts like he's got a support system, and he does. It's not the majority of the country, but, like I've got relatives who are diehard Trumpers, believe God put him there, like that's a thing that exists. I don't like it, but, Trump has been able to very successfully craft a personality cult around him. And he constantly is able to strengthen that and reaffirm those folks' support by constantly like acting as though there's a witch hunt. And the guy's also just brilliant at like, manipulation and neurolinguistic programming. So yeah, he's got his like cult. Nobody has ever liked Macron, but Macron from the very beginning has acted as though he has a popular mandate, as though he has the support of the public behind him. What he does have is the support of the government behind, France's government is kind of a mixture between like the American congressional system and like a British parliament system. And it's kind of like, I'm not going to really go into detail about how it works, because, we don't have 8 hours. But it kind of works on like a power sharing thing, the way like you hear people talk about in England, right? Where there's like, multiple parties. It's not a 2-party system. But whichever party has the most people can then like get other parties to like kind of work on their side, and they can carry a mandate. So he does carry a mandate coalition. So he does carry a mandate in terms of like pushing his shit through. And that's the problem. He's from the very beginning, he ran on this whole, like, I'm not left, I'm not right, I'm something completely different. And he is something completely different in terms of like, the history of people who have run France. He's a neoliberal banker. Who, like, more than anything, just thinks and acts, I mean, the comparison I keep making as an American in France is like, he acts like an American. He thinks like an American. What he's trying to do to the French system is Americanize the system. He wants the rich to be richer, and go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, if I can ask a question,
sure.
Why, I'm rando American number 600. Why do the French keep on having strikes every 10 minutes, it seems? What the hell's going on?
Well, I mean, there's a historic strike culture. And, as an American, what I would say to you, the main reason the French have strikes constantly, and, because they learned in 1789 that violence gets poor people what they want. As opposed to Americans who, the hypocrisy of the American liberal is that, they can look back historically at violence that's won rights and said, oh yeah, MLK did the right thing, whatever, but they refused, those suffragettes, yeah, we understand. Oh, those labor strikers, we understand. But they refuse to condone anything other than, peaceful, nonviolent protest in order to secure future rights. Whereas the French, since the day of the guillotine, were like, nope, this is how we get shit done. We keep the rich in scared. We keep them in fear. We keep the government in fear. We constantly keep them in fear. And a whole lot of it just has to do with a core cultural difference. I would say, Americans think entitlement is a dirty word. Americans will frame, what the poor deserve or don't deserve versus what the rich have to give or don't give as handouts, right? Entitlements. It kills me every time I hear a poor person start an argument like, well, don't get me wrong, I don't think that, we deserve handouts from the rich, but ... Where the French are like, no, Like, that's the social contract. That's been the social contract since 1789. We tax the fuck out of you, so we have a good life, and in response, we'll keep the guillotine in the storage shed instead of dragging it out to the town square. Like, that's always been the attitude here. And frankly, you know, the French have amongst the best quality of life of any people in the world, and French society is among the most equal of any liberal democracy. So they're doing something right. One of many reasons I moved over here is because it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to live here, and the quality of life is much better. And
so wait. Real quick. Are you saying that you actually have a guillotine in your storage closet? Because that's interesting.
But over the past year, in the midst of the Gilets Jaunes movement, there were several times in French cities where they actually built one. I mean, I'm sure they didn't intend on actually using it, but they built it.
Holy
and they
shit.
dragged it in front of there. You could find pictures. It's somewhere in southern France. Maybe it was Lyon. Maybe it was Marseille. But they actually erected a fucking guillotine in front of, like, City Hall and held a protest on it, basically saying, you know, like, keep this up and you're next. And so, you know, here the attitude is that people deserve a good life. And yeah, the rich are going to pay for it. And that, you know, that's a very, very strong cultural belief amongst the working class, the middle classes here, that just absolutely does not exist in America. You know, Americans have just been so whipped into, you know, both the Calvinist doctrine around, you know, poor people are poor because they're lazy and it's an individual failing. And then the whole American dream idea where you're always rich or rich because you work hard. You know, it's that Steinbeck quote about, you know, socialism never took off in America because the American working class think they're temporarily embarrassed millionaires. You know, the French working class know that the rich are rich because of their labor. So the attitude is, you owe us. So that's, you know, that's where the French strike culture comes from. And frankly, you know, it's also simply because it works. You know, I mean, you can look at, you know, you can look at the revolution, but, you know, if we look at modern history, if you look at, you know, the past 80 years, I mean, the time of the American New Deal, the same time as the American New Deal was what's called the Popular Front movement here in France, where, you know, at the time the workers didn't have the legal right to strike. They did so anyway. And part of why they did so is because they looked at what was happening over in the U.S. They looked at the New Deal. And, you know, the Great Depression had hit here too, not as badly, but, you know, there were similar material conditions. And, you know, the French were basically like, you know, something's got to give. So there was a 2-month-long national strike, even though striking was against the law. They blockaded the factories. So, you know, it was impossible to bring in scab workers. They shut the country down, and the government conceded. And that's when, and frankly, you know, the French did better than the Americans did under the New Deal. That's where the French won the legal right to strike across all industries, as well as 2 weeks of paid vacation. And that's where, you know, the French now have 5 weeks of paid vacation. But, you know, the French won in 1936 something that Americans still don't have, 2 weeks of paid vacation.
Wow.
And, you know, from then, 20 years later, I believe it was in 56, it was right around the time that the Fourth Republic fell, they got their 3rd week. It was after in 68, they almost took down the entire government. The concessions that came out of 68 gave them a 35% raise in the minimum wage, I believe, as well as a 4th week of paid vacation. And then when Mitterrand ran in 1981, one of his campaign promises was a 5th week of paid vacation. They got their 5th week in 1981. And
so
they've
wait. Matt, your friend, a font of knowledge, first of all.
Yes.
There's a lot of these things I did not know, especially about just the French. Just wait a minute, you promised us this, we will burn your house down. Okay, you win. That's incredible. So this is why, because when you look at Matthew Phillips' Facebook feed, it's always eat the rich, guillotines, eat the rich, guillotines. Now I understand.
Well, but Americans are changing. I mean, you know, other than doing stuff like this, you know, I'm a graphic artist. I'm a silk screener, and I'll tell you, you know, 10 years ago, maybe a little less, right around the time of Occupy, I remember making a patch with just a big fork, and it said "Eat the Rich." And I posted that patch on my Facebook page, and I got a lot of pushback. I got the, ooh, you know, that's like class war. Ooh, I don't know, man. You know, like, don't you think that that's a little violent? Don't you think that that's pushing it too far? Like last year, I resurrected that same patch for the first time in years, 5 or 6 years. I posted it up again, and all of a sudden, all those same people are like, "Fuck yeah, eat the rich, eat the rich, eat the rich." So,
Matt, I now understand. Yes.
Yeah, the American attitude is changing, and it's especially amongst the younger kids. Those terribly condemned millennials, right? They get it. The system's never worked on their behalf. They've been screwed like no group's been screwed before. So they're all for eat the rich. They're all for I see these like scare articles from like places like the Wall Street Journal. Oh, 50% of millennials believe in socialism, and I'm like, fuck yes, finally. It's about time, exactly, because that whole, American dream ideology, it can't hold anymore, and it's got too many holes. It's not holding.
Okay. Yeah,
so
listening to some of what Allie has very eloquently and fully talked about here, like part of it makes me so angry because on the one hand you have, so many Americans who are willing to like defend or valorize the founding fathers who were revolutionaries. They had their various weaknesses or whatever. I don't want to like hold up their slave holding or some of the other very horrible things, but they were revolutionaries. They were like, what's the word, traitors to the British crown,
Yeah.
And you have people who are just blithely saying, these are, heroes, but then you say, well, okay. Or look at World War II, like World War II was about, bringing fascists down, and now it's just like, I don't know if I want to, participate in this thing if it's not going to be nonviolent. Well, come on.
Exactly.
Make
When I hear critiques of Antifa, I'm always like, yeah, my grandpa was Antifa. They're like, what? I was like, oh, I'm sorry. They called it the Navy back then.
They called it the Navy.
That's what like everyone who fought in World War II was doing. Like that was, they weren't just punching Nazis. They were shooting them. They were, bombing their submarines. They were bombing their airplanes. Yeah. Like that. But just.
Just the very use of the phrase Antifa even, changing the narrative. Anti-fascist. That is what it is, man. So I know people who are, Antifa this, Antifa that. Antifa is not an organization. No. There is no head of Antifa. You cannot send a letter to Antifa and get an Antifa badge back in 3 weeks. There is no such thing, man. These people are against fascism. You're supposed to be against fascism because you like democracy, freedom, and capitalism. So what the hell, man?
Yep.
Why do you keep talking about Antifa? Yes, punch Nazis in the face, please.
No,
yes.
We don't. That's, over here, Antifa is not controversial. We have like youth fascist groups that are, we have, the French equivalent of like Turning Point USA, all that, shit.
Oh, no.
Oh, God. Turning Point.
They definitely exist. But those who confront them are definitely not framed the same way as the American Antifa movements. Just here in Rennes, I live in a, university town of about, 200,000 people. I think it's the 8th largest city in France. And recently, there's been a very small, because this is an incredibly left-wing town, but there's an incredibly small right-wing college group. I forget what they're called, but I'm reading their shit. They sound like Turning Point. And they've been like holding weekly meetings at bars, and having to do it quietly because the bar owners don't want to give them space. And the reason the bar owners don't want to give them space is because when the Antifa folks find out, the Antifa folks show up and just start smashing shit and start breaking shit or violently confronting them and also vandalize the bar. And, you can say what you want about violence and property damage, but you know what? Like, it's deprived of them of a platform. There's been 2 bars, one who insists it was an accident, who insists, I didn't know that that's what that group was. I wouldn't have given them space if I knew that was that group. And then another bar that was more kind of like, almost kind of took like the American libertarian, like, I have to let everyone do what they want to do. But yeah, there's this video on YouTube of them just being violently targeted. And, the newspaper here try to frame it not too different than, oh, look at this violence, da 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 da. But there's nowhere near the kind of reaction that there would be in the United States.
Yeah, man. Well, that one James Baldwin quote about how you can say what you want until the things that you say are against my right to exist. I mean, that is I obviously I butchered the quote, but that's the bottom line. That's the meaning of this quote. And so this is why, you got free speech, fine, but once it's about, get brown people out of my country because they're stealing from me, when it's not the truth, this is the shit that gets you punched in the face, man. Yep. And you got to remember that the First Amendment in the United States is about being able to speak out against the government without getting the government to murder you. Not hey, I don't like black people, you should give me the right to say what I want. No, I'm going to punch you in the face.
No, Americans have very much lost the basic idea of, I see all these people like, I was censored. Like, no, like, if someone's kicking you out of a Facebook group, that's not censorship. Censorship is something the government does. If Antifa shows up and shuts down Richard Spencer at a university, that's not censorship. But the other thing over here, we don't have the First Amendment over here. There's general free speech laws, but there are specific European-wide prohibitions against certain types of speech. Basically, any overt Nazi-esque talk is against the law here. Waving swastika flag is against the law here. These things are Holocaust denial is a prosecutable offense, and there's a really good reason for that. Yes. Actually, Marine Le Pen's father, who was the head of the political party, which she is now the head of, he was the head of it for the first 3 decades of its existence. He was prosecuted, I think, 2 or 3 times, both within France and also by the European Commission of Human Rights for Holocaust denial. That's just, that's one reason Marine Le Pen goes out of her way to separate herself from her father. She's done an excellent job at rebranding the party to the point where she's now changed the name. And tried to distance from those beliefs because he is a notorious Holocaust denier and he's been prosecuted for that. But overt anti-Semitism, overt pro-Nazi talk is against the law here. So those groups actually do have to be more discreet. They talk a whole lot more in code. They definitely more focused, for example, on anti-immigrant stuff because that's not specifically against the law. Right. Not if they frame it right. But I think that's another difference when we talk about why Americans seem kind of okay with fascism right now. World War II for Americans was something that happened an ocean away. Other than the attack on Pearl Harbor and a couple of submarines on Long Island, the average American citizen did not personally suffer at the hands of fascists. Its bodies got sent home, right? But they never knew what it was like to have, armed fascists marching through your city who could shoot you at any moment with no consequence. Europe, all of Europe, especially France, what was under, the vast majority of France was under occupation throughout World War II. There are people here, people in their 70s, 80s, 90s who have a living memory of what it means to have your town occupied by Nazis, to, if you say the wrong thing, you can be shot. If you believe the wrong thing, you can be shot. If you're the wrong religion, you can be shot. When you walk through the streets of Paris, every single public school in Paris has a plaque outside the front door with that lists how many children from that school were rounded up and sent to concentration camps. You don't get away from it here. It is a living memory. Every single school that had children taken has that plaque.
So, Allie, the obvious question that I have for you is why are Americans not as willing or able to strike or to do a general strike in the same way that the French or other people are willing?
Well, there's a few basic reasons. The main one that I would stress is that Americans, for the most part, don't have the legal right to strike without consequences. As I mentioned earlier, in 1936, the French won the legal right to strike. There are rules around that process. and they can be sanctioned if they violate the rules. But, for a good part of Americans, walking off the job means that they'll probably be fired. Even unionized Americans, there's several states where there's laws prohibiting even union members from striking, which, begs the question, then what's the fucking point of a union if you don't have the power to strike? But it's still, I remember when New York City went on a transit strike, and, and it was this huge, controversy because it was actually illegal to do so, and those workers were risking their jobs by doing so. Yeah. Another factor is France is heavily unionized. I think something like 70% of French industries are unionized. The unions hold a lot of power. They are not wedded to a political party the way that American unions have been, in bed with the Democrats, since right after World War II, right before World War II even. So that's another huge factor is low union participation in the U.S., low belief in unions in the U.S., right to work laws, right? Americans have next to no labor protections. The French have among the best labor protections in the world, if not the best labor protections in the world. American corporations often don't like to do business in France because it's almost impossible to fire a French worker. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. They are incredibly protected. Another factor is that Americans live much more paycheck to paycheck. So even if they legally had the right to strike, they don't have enough money to take a day or two off. They literally can't afford to do so. The French, where, there's people are still tight on income, there's still poverty, but they're not quite as tight as the United States are. They're much more willing to take that hit, especially if it means, if they're confident that either they're going to preserve a right that's vital or they're going to gain a right that's vital. Another piece being, again, there's a history of doing it here. They've learned that it works. Most Americans have completely lost touch with the history of, the American labor movement, which, for all intents and purposes, died in the 1930s, died with, the New Deal. So, here you have this, over the past century, you have this culture of constantly striking and the government responding and the government backing off and either preserving a right or gaining a right. What's going on right now, for example, the pension reform, this was tried, I believe, in 1995 was the last time the French government tried to reform the pension system. And the strikes in 95 were similar to what you are seeing now. After a few weeks or so, the government backed off. The government said, okay, we're not going to touch that shit because it was just too damaging to them. So, here there is a serious understanding that this is a tactic that works. And Americans just don't have that history. They've forgotten that history. Their grandparents had that history, but they currently don't have that history. There's also just a lack of class consciousness. Yeah. Again, it's that temporary embarrassed millionaire thing, right?
Yes, that's a great line.
There's an understanding from the working class that no, the rich are rich because of us and they owe us something. And, people here don't valorize millionaires and billionaires. They don't see them as people who earn their money through working hard.
Well, if I can interject really quickly, it's true what you say about the striking. In America, there's not that much striking, but in the last year or two, Oklahoma had a teacher strike. Yeah. So some people are waking up. Chicago recently had a teacher strike. Clark County, Nevada.
America has had more strikes in the past couple of years than this is the biggest thing we've seen for about 30 years.
Yeah, right. No, and it's starting.
Waking up. They're waking up, yeah.
The same way that my Eat the Rich patch is suddenly more popular, right? There is a sudden understanding of Americans that, wow, we're really getting screwed. And it's because they're getting screwed so bad, they can finally see they're getting screwed.
Right, they're waking up.
And so, I think it will hit a point where there will be more of a mass consciousness that striking is the answer, but you're not there yet. You're definitely not there yet. It's going to take a long time to build that. You have certain segments of the country, certain groups of people, teachers being one of them, that kind of universally are like, yeah, we're getting a real fucking raw deal. But, the other thing that happens here that I think needs to happen in America in order for a strike movement to succeed is a joining of, here they call it the convergence des luttes, the joining of fights. So, when one industry has a beef others strike in solidarity, because they know that if they all start striking at once, that's going to bring much more of a what the fuck response from the government, and the government's going to be much more likely to act. So, right now the strikes are about pension reform, but, the students are striking. The students aren't striking because of pension reform. The students are striking because they're dealing with similar precarities. The grants for student living has been cut. Macron is trying to institute tuition for foreigners. They're trying to revamp the student admission system from an open admission to a merit-based system. They have their own set of grievances that they're disconnected from the pension, directly, but they're still about Macron. They're still about neoliberalism. They're still about this big picture. And so they're joining in on this strike because they know that that's just going to make it all the more difficult for the powers that be if all these separate industries bring their own grievances together at the same time. And that's what needs to happen. You can't just have the teachers. You need to have a bunch of other people saying, well, if they're doing it, we're doing it. You need the convergence of the fights. You need enough people striking. This country, was brought to a halt on Thursday. Yeah. Anyone who wanted to go to work in Paris had to take a taxi, walk, or ride a bike. The entire public transit system was down, and then Extinction Rebellion ran around and sabotaged the entire electronic scooter system by covering over the QR codes.
That's awesome. You see that, Matt?
No.
That's just crafty, though. How crafty is that?
It's totally crafty. It's fixable. It's like they didn't destroy them outright.
Yeah, exactly.
But their point was very legitimate. Their point was, this is false. This is false, green capitalism. This is false environmentalism.
Well, even here, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Even here in Korea, was it this year or last year, Matt, that there was the taxi driver strike?
Yeah, last year, yeah.
Yeah, because here in Korea, they have something called Kakao Taxi. And so Kakao Taxi is very similar to Uber back home.
Okay.
And for a while, it seemed as if the Kakao Taxi was going to severely cut into the taxi drivers.
Yes.
The taxi drivers' money. So the taxi drivers went on strike. I think they fought and they won. That was really interesting to see happen here. And
also to add to what Ali was saying, I think the most quick and painless introduction to a socialist history of the United States is John Nichols' The S Word. It was released in 2011 and then updated in 2015. Extremely readable, and he just, introduces the reader to all these, socialist influenced movements. Like the New Deal, for example, it was opposed by a lot of more left-leaning socialists.
Oh, yeah. Really? That's one of the main reasons they were able to push it through. That was the government shutting down the socialist movement. They were like, let's give something more mainstream, slightly more corporate friendly that will please the masses, because if we don't, socialism's going to take off.
So,
and it worked. It was very successful.
But on the other hand, it was there were some socialists who, saw a lot of what was going on with the New Deal and said, look, this is, maybe not our ideal, but it's, certainly a hell of a lot better than a variety of other things we can contemplate. Anyways, it's a great history, extremely painless, very entertaining.
Thank you, Matt's Book Club.
Another, thing I want to point out, on that topic is that's another huge difference between here and there. Socialism is not a dirty word. Communism is not a dirty word. The French Communist Party is one of the strongest parties out there, one of the oldest parties out there.
The problem is in America, as soon as you say socialism, somebody says communism, and then you say, wait, communism, government, socialism, economy, okay? So once we can start from there, now we can have our disagreement.
Right. But even
two are not the same.
Even old school communism, you still have more of an acceptance, a critical acceptance. But, many major cities have, streets named after Stalingrad. It's not quite so taboo to support. It never has been as taboo to support communism, even the most authoritarian types, as it has been in the United States. You know, like you could always travel to Cuba freely for here in the recent past. You know,
right.
You don't have that same kind of widespread condemnation of any type of communism and or socialism. And, you know, and people just also, they know what those words mean more.
Right.
You know, they're you know, another piece of this is like the French just overall are better critical thinkers. You know, they introduced philosophy in high school here. I mean, not across the board. You still have, you know, people who think Marine Le Pen says smart things. But, you know, there's definitely, you know, it's a more educated populace overall. It's a populace that does not have the anti-intellectual streak.
Right.
That you know, the American, especially, you know, working class, you know, the people who you want to, you know, unionize and rise up, have a rather stubborn commitment to anti-intellectualism that isn't nearly as prominent here. So, you know, that's another, you know,
I think
you
also,
talk about things like communism and socialism without people being able to use them as scare tactics in a way that just doesn't work. It's getting better in the U.S., you know. That's where I give, like, you know, Bernie Sanders and AOC and, you know, the DSA a lot of credit. I think there's been a lot of recent movements on that again, in a generation from now, I can see, you know, more mainstream acceptance of socialism. A generation from now, I can see a massive general strike movement happening. But I don't see it happening, you know, in the next 6 months or, you know, even in the next 6 years.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Americans are too tied to empire. They think that, well, this is a great bragging point. Like, we can kick anybody's ass. And unfortunately, the thing that goes along with that empire is this basically capitalism. You can't untie yourself from capitalism until you say, you know what, empire's not important to me.
Yep.
So the French are not running an empire, so
no. Well, I mean, you know, I mean, they still have colonies. You know, their hands aren't clean.
Yeah,
but nowhere to the extent that the United States is. No. And, you know, and it's interesting too, because, you know, there is a movement of people here. You know, I would say most even conservatives don't necessarily support Trump. You know, they see through him. But, you know, I have met several people over the past couple of years who do support Trump, not because they support his policies, but because they believe he's going to bring an end to the American empire through his incompetence. And they believe that would be better for the rest of the world. They're sick of both American military influence as well as American cultural influence, the way that America has driven globalization. They consider that bad for European culture. They consider that bad for European society. And, you know, it's almost like an accelerationist kind of idea, where they're like, yeah, go ahead, Trump, like, kill it. We'll be better off if you kill it.
Yeah, my response to November 2016 was similar. I was just like, okay, fine. You know, whereas a lot of my friends were just like, oh, Hillary lost, oh my God.
I was just horrified because I grew up in New York, and it was always vaguely in the back of your mind that Donald Trump, while rich, is not the type of person that you would necessarily want to hang out with.
That's what killed me, you know. I grew up seeing him all over page 6 in the New York Post as a kid.
Yeah, he's a clown.
Like, I knew this guy was a con man since I was 4 years old, you know. Yeah. My parents used to watch those 7:30 p.m. tabloid shows on NBC. You'd see him with, like, you know, 2 different blondes every single week pulling some sort of scam.
He was a clown.
I mean, I'll never forget when The Apprentice first came on. I'm just sitting there like, wait, why is this a show? What is this? But yeah, like, New Yorkers have always known, you know. But he was really good at fleecing everybody else.
Well, frankly, that TV show is what sold people that he could be a good president.
Totally.
The TV show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also convinced people, you know, again, people who didn't watch his, like, 30 years worth of failures in New York, you know, people are convinced he's a good businessman. I mean, I've talked to my own relatives. I've listened to them defend him like that. You know, he's a really good businessman. He's good with money, so he'll be good for the country. Yeah. And I'm like, do you know how many times he's filed for bankruptcy? Like, there's very good reason he's not releasing his tax returns. He's not a good businessman.
Yeah. Well, simply put, you know, the entire casino industry is based upon getting people drunk and just letting them empty their pockets and then walk out. And so the fact that man can go bankrupt at a business that literally is just about people opening their wallets and getting wasted. Exactly. I mean, that's a hit and a half for your ass. This motherfucker is not a good
that up. Exactly.
Yeah. Atlantic City collapses because his casino is just the worst.
Yep.
And how do you fail? It's like if you're a drug dealer and you can't be a successful crack dealer, you know? It's addictive. It's addictive, man. How do you not succeed at this? What is your...
Yep.
As a matter of fact, wasn't that from that movie, Thank You for Smoking? J.K. Simmons, he's like, it's not a fucking hard thing to do. The product is addictive, you know? How are we failing at this, you know?
Exactly.
Anyway.
Oh
so,
my God.
It seems like... Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I'm silently laughing, right? Oh my God. So fun.
So this seems like a good spot to wrap it up, unless you got another thing coming, Matt.
No. I mean, in a way, I would love to just, go for another hour or two. But Allie, the time zone difference, we've got to respect her time.
Yeah, it's 2:30 a.m. here. I'm a late night person, but I can only go so far.
We are so sorry.
But you've given us...
I got to get to the grocery store before 1 tomorrow because it all closes at 1 because labor laws.
Nice.
But you've given us a lot to chew on here, and once again, I am so thankful that you came on our little podcast, and I think it's just amazing. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me. This has been fun.